People have told stories of the strange and supernatural for centuries. Tales of the restless dead return to haunt the living. Whispers of damned souls doing the devil's bidding on Earth. Rumors of inhuman things that still hunt in the old forests, untouched by the glare of modern life. There may be more to these stories than you could ever imagine. Join us tonight as we delve into the deeper truth inside these mysteries.
How the devil are you all?
Welcome to the Realm of the Supernatural podcast with me, Finchy McFinch.
And me, Solway McSolway.
McSolway. We'll go with that one, shall we?
And this is the most fun you can have with your second best thing you can do with your clothes on, as we established last week, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Right.
So we've got an absolutely extraordinarily packed show today, haven't we?
Philip Mantle on today, haven't we?
UFOs. Fucking love UFO stories.
I think, yeah.
It's just one of the mysteries that just keeps getting more mysterious.
Keeps on giving.
Yeah. And then we got a listener story from Rachel Greaves, which is narrated by Sophie, and she's actually got books out on Amazon. No, you can get them for your Kindle and that.
Yeah.
So, if you enjoy the story, which I think you're going to love, this is like a snippet of the story. So if you enjoy what you're going to hear now, then you probably want to pick her book up. I think it's next to fuck all. I think it's like 59p or whatever it is. You know what Kindle books are, you know what I mean? Yeah. So if you do it, if you like it, I'll leave obviously the description. You'll get the link there. If not, you come across to Facebook and we'll have the link there.
Yeah. We've got a couple of reviews we've still got to read out, so we'll get... Shall we crack on with them now? Shall we crack on with some of the reviews?
Yeah, let's do the reviews before we go into the story.
Yeah, we've got... So we've got a few new ones coming. We've got one from Fred's Dre. That's on the Apple Podcasts, and that's... Love this podcast. 5 stars. How the devil are you? Yeah, love these guys. We've got another one here,
which is love it, 5 stars, a great podcast, look forward to every episode that I listen to while on my walks, unique and varied, and this is from Fish PM in the United States of America.
United States.
He's actually a Patreon supporter, so woo woo.
And one more
that's
from
for you, Fisher. Woo woo.
One more for...
I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that noise.
Just a random sound effect that he's got in. Merlin9761, also from the United States of America. Just found the show and catching up. Great fun hosts and all the awesome weird kind of stuff I wish I'd people to talk to about. Would like to see more cryptid episodes, which we've got some lined up, haven't we? And I prefer the episodes with no guests. Well, no guests.
Well, you enjoy today then.
Well, yeah. Keep up the great work, guys. Yeah, thank you very much for that. It's from Merlin. 5 stars as well. Great show. The Merlin. Now, just wanted to get in here as well.
Keep sending reviews.
Yes,
please.
Keep sending them in.
They mean an awful lot to us.
They do. Just one thing as well I wanted to pop in. I was speaking to Tonya, who we had on a couple of weeks ago now.
Yeah.
Speaking to Tonya recently, and a bit of an update on that.
The situation.
I won't go into too much into it, but she's made contact. So she's made future contact to the...
With said ghost.
And we're currently in talks at the moment how to deal with the situation, how we want to go around it. But yeah, some of the things are more personal, so I won't go into them. But yeah, they are making contact, and we're seeing how we can move them on as such. Not so much, whether or not she wants to keep him, we don't know. But we're going to see how we can progress with that. But we'll keep you updated on that one. Also, I'm going to be posting up some pictures on the Hangout of this sloth that Lee kindly
the Christmas present.
Gave me a present. Now it's still at the I took it out of water actually yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's been in water now for
not a real sloth, in case the RSPCA listeners.
Well, yeah. Just to clarify that, I don't have a sloth.
Keep a sloth in the bath.
Living in my in the bath. I've taken it out of the water yesterday. So it's been in there a good week and a half now or something.
Yeah. Have you been changing the water regular?
I've been topping it up, so I've been changing and topping it up, and it's now the. I mean,
cricket ball.
Bigger. So you've got that size. You've got a skull on there that I can see. Viewers can't see it, but it's it's roughly about the same size as that. You know,
is it?
I didn't realize. Really? I was going to bring it with me, but
get it in pocket.
No, I can't.
Put it in a bag.
But the thing is, once you're taking it out of water, it starts shrinking down again. So all the water's coming
straight
out.
Away?
No, not straight away. No, gradual. But I come back into the kitchen because I put it on the side.
I'm gonna put it in a fish tank,
and I put it on the drainage board. And before I know it, I was like, oh, there's quite a bit of water coming out here, you know.
So have you done like have you taken photographs?
Yeah, I've taken a progression.
Have you got like a ruler next to it and that?
I haven't done
anything
I didn't do a ruler. I should have done a ruler one.
So I mean, to all intents and purposes, it just could look like the ball's getting smaller.
Well, yeah, could do, yeah. But no,
what about the music box? You're going to put a video of you playing the music?
Oh, yeah, I need to put music. Yeah,
it's from China, so you never know, do you?
Yeah, it still works, yeah.
I'll put a video of that then.
But
right, so we do Rachel's story and then...
Yes, we shall, yes.
All right, so here is Rachel's Demon in Yorkshire.
This story is true, and my mother and I kept everything quiet for a long time, but my partner has encouraged me to share with others the story of the worst paranormal experience of my life. It was the winter of 1985. I was 11 years old, and my grandmother had just died. My mother and I had to move to a new home, and we didn't have a penny between us. The house was a small 2-bedroom terraced house on a council estate in Hickmondwick, West Yorkshire. There was an old cemetery just streets away. I come from a long line of sensitives, and I was raised with the shared knowledge of the paranormal, and we have seen many things, but never anything like what we were about to experience over the next 7 years. Upon moving in, we didn't notice a thing wrong about the place. Making a home from nothing took up much of our time and also took a lot out of us. The house was large and quiet, but hard to heat and very cold. It started with banging noises from the attic, maybe just the wind, we thought. Large cold spots on the landing. Smells that came from nowhere. Things started going missing. My school shoes, decorative ornaments, books, trinkets, all would be found at the bottom of the garden, underneath an overhanging bush. Petty little things. People in the street would see a woman waving at them from an upstairs window, in her 60s, with grey hair and a nice cheerful face. They would come to ask us, "Who's the old woman staying with you?" Of course, there was no one staying with us. Many friends, when visiting, would see her on the stairs and even in the bathroom when they went in to use the loo. We never told anyone about her unless they experienced her themselves. We named her Martha, and she never gave us any trouble. One day, a neighbour took us aside one day and told us a couple who lived in the house in the 1960s. The husband was violent towards his wife, jealous and possessive of her, and every day before work he would lock her in, but not just in the house, in the attic. A year soon passed and we still didn't have any money. School life was hard for me. I was bullied constantly for being poor. I was also going through puberty at the time whilst my mother was going through menopause. You can imagine the air was always dense and full of tension. The spirit activity was getting really bad. We were both having bad dreams where darkness covered us, groped by unseen hands and raped by something invisible. When we awoke, we would find fresh bruises on our thighs. I had the largest bedroom to myself. It was brightly decorated, strewn with soft toys, records, tapes, books, and the walls covered with rock music posters. My mother had the bedroom next to mine, but as a single parent she would sleep on the sofa in the living room. The bed would always be made though, in case we had any visitors staying over. The noises would come from inside that bedroom. There would be whispering, soft moans, and loud bangs. I would turn up my TV to block out the noise, and I would try not to notice the shadow people walking past my door. This would happen on a weekly basis, and we became used to it. On the mornings after a night of such heavy activity, we would look in to find the bedding bunched up in the middle of the bed, fresh stains on the exposed mattress, but no sign of anything leaking from anywhere. We once decided to go to our local church for help. Though my mother was not particularly religious, we did not attend church. We spoke with the local vicar, a lovely young man who heard our story, and he later came to bless our house. After the blessing, all went quiet, so we were totally unprepared when just a few weeks later, all hell broke loose. A smell around the house grew sickening, like a hot and fetid, sour excrement. The drains were clear, freshly cleaned. It was as though something unseen was breathing its stench in your face. Sometimes there were deep growling, snorting noises like a pig or a boa, and strange scratches. We had taken to sleeping in the living room on the sofas with the light on, and would even pray for help. It only seemed to make whatever it was angrier. One day my mother was washing the windows. The upstairs landing was quite large, and she was a small lady, so she would always use a dining chair to reach the top of the frames. She often did this and was accustomed to it. I was tidying my room, and we were chatting while cleaning. Suddenly there was a loud bang, and I rushed to the landing in time to see my mother and the chair she stood on be pushed so hard that she hit halfway down the flight of stairs and managed to grab onto the spindles to stop herself from falling to the bottom. My mother was very shaken, bruised and battered. We sat and she told me what happened. She'd heard a whispering, and then suddenly there came a really hard shove to the chair, sending both it and her flying. We would have loved to move out, but we had no money and nowhere to go. Waiting lists for council houses were years long, and so we simply did our best. By the time I was 15 years old, we had started going on long walks at night, as it was a rather rural area and always felt safe to us. We would go to friends' houses, and only go back to our house to sleep. My mother had a few boyfriends during the time we were living in the house, but they never lasted very long. I don't think they could understand what was going on, or were simply too scared to hang around. There was one boyfriend who actually stood his ground, a lovely man who came to be like a father to me, and for a time we were almost like a normal family. We were all in bed one night, having recently moved them downstairs into the living room. I was at one side of the large room asleep in my bed. Mother and her boyfriend were laid in theirs, awake, chatting, when they saw what looked like 3 huge tadpoles, each about 3 foot long, sliding and slithering up the bed towards them. The stench and the whispering voices were at their worst. The banging noises started, and the grunting pig's sounds were louder than they'd ever been. Then in the corner near my bed there appeared a white figure, which looked like the silhouette of a Catholic bishop, wearing his robes with a mitre upon his head. The figure made motions towards me as though it were placing a blessing upon me. My mother screamed. Her boyfriend grabbed me, half asleep, from my bed and ran us to the local church, where our hammering on the door got the vicar startled from his bed at 4 a.m. He took us into the church, up to the altar where he proceeded to bless each of us, laying his hands on our heads one by one. During his blessing, Mother's boyfriend took on an intensely angry look, then his legs spasmed as though trying to spring him away from the vicar and his blessing. The vicar told us that I was being kept safe by a holy man. We were shattered and walked home, not only from lack of sleep but also weary, so exhausted by what was happening to us. There were times when things got far too much, way out of hand. My mother would change before my eyes, taking on the appearance of an angry old crone who called me Charlotte and said she wanted to hurt me. By this time we were in touch with a spiritualist group, and through them we contacted someone that they thought could actually help us, an exorcist. He arrived a few days later, a rather normal, soft-spoken man in his 50s, with the appearance and manner of a schoolteacher. He exorcised my mother whilst her boyfriend held her down. It was an awful thing to watch. To our shock and near disbelief, the exorcist told us that the cause of all the happenings was a demon infestation. As the banging, growling and grunting sounded and the sour stench hung thick in the air as this quiet, nondescript man repeatedly recited his special prayers. Suddenly, while he was speaking, the light in the room changed. The sunlight streamed in. We noticed that all the noises had stopped, and from nowhere the air was filled with the fresh, clean scent of roses. A couple of years later, when I was 17, we managed to get a housing exchange with a young family. They had a small boy of 5 and were looking for a larger home. We thought that whatever it was that had troubled us had gone, and that they would be safe. A few months later, we had begun to settle into our new home, albeit in a rougher area. We were away from that house, and that was good enough for us. One day, there was a knock at the door and the boy's mother was there, and she told us of how she loved the house at first, but her son had started seeing an old woman around the house. But she said the worst thing was the staircase. They had a child safety gate fitted at both the top and bottom of the stairs, and the boy was playing in his bedroom one morning, when suddenly the mother heard her son cry out in pain. Somehow the boy had fallen down the stairs and broken his arm, even though the safety gates were still locked. As he cries in her arms, he told her that the nasty man had pushed him. She came to us. She said to ask if anything weird had happened to us there. It has now been over 20 years since these events happened, and I still have nightmares about being back there. But I will admit, I am strangely drawn to that old house, and I wonder, is that thing still there? Was anyone else affected by it? When and why did it even begin to trouble the house? Yes, I am drawn to that house, but I would never go back there. Would you?
Okay, so there you go. So, like I say, fantastic little snippet of the story there. And I think if you enjoy that, you'll want to pick her book up for sure.
Definitely.
Ebook.
Definitely. It's cheap as chips.
Yeah.
Chips aren't cheap anymore.
No, they're not now. Especially get fish with it.
Cheap as a Freddo. Well, you can't say that now, can you?
No, they've gone up
They've gone up as well. Cheap as Space Raiders. Well, we could go on all day, but there we go. So, yeah, next up we've got Philip Mantle. All Stories UFO. I think you're going to like this one.
Yeah, if you're listening on Patreon, obviously you're going to get another 40 minutes of this.
Yes.
But if you're listening on the free show, then this is the first 20 minutes of the interview, and he gets into a couple of cases. We're going to speak to him later on in the year because there's lots more to cover. We've got some UFO cases coming up ourselves, and we didn't get into them today, obviously, but we're going to mention them on a future show. So here is Philip Mantle. But yeah, if you want to start by telling us how you got into this, and then we'll go from there, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm often asked, how did you get into, UFO research? Was there any particular one thing that started off? All I can say is that ever since I was a young lad, I was brought up in a mining village. My dad worked down the pit, and but for some reason, I always had an interest in, we'll call it all things paranormal. From a very early age, my mum was from Northern Ireland, and I blame her really. God bless her, she's no longer with us. But my mum, when she lived in Ireland, she lived in quite a rural part, and she told me, quite honestly, that when she was a little girl, she met a fairy down by the stream where they lived, and she conversed with this fairy, and she described it. And I remember asking my mum about this as I grew up, and she would tell me the same story she told my children, her grandchildren. And I often asked her, and I said, Mum, was it real? And she said, well, it was real to me, son. That's all I can tell you. And again, I think I was quite fortunate because literally my best friend's grandmother lived the opposite side of the street. And I think when I was about 13, 14, I used to attend a spiritualist church with her. And whilst I found it interesting, it wasn't really for me. I thought there was something lacking in it, in that respect.
Yeah.
So my mum was also a great reader. We were brought up with books. She liked, romantic novels and that kind of stuff. So, I was always read about all things paranormal. Now, after I left high school, the interest continued. I mean, at high school, I used to get up and do talks about the paranormal, which wasn't a great way of getting yourself a girlfriend at high school, But nonetheless, the type of thing. What did you do in your summer holidays? Oh, we went on holiday, sir, and I went, horse riding. What about you, Philip? Well, I went to the spiritualist church. Oh, well, yeah. So it was that kind of thing. So, but then I remember reading one UFO book, although the paranormal rather, and it was astronomy, and there was one chapter in it on UFOs. I can't remember the name of this book to this very day. It was one that I came across somewhere. And, of course, we're going back now, long before the days of the internet. I'm talking, the mid 1970s. And then, of course, the Steven Spielberg movie Close Encounters came out here in 1978. And at the end of 1978, I went to work in Germany for a short while. Now, didn't speak the language, so one of the things I did was read. And my mum sent me a few books, and there was more stuff about UFOs. And it got me more interested. Now, when I returned home in 1979, an auntie of mine lived just round the corner from us, and she brought me a newspaper cutting. It was the local newspaper, the Yorkshire Evening Post, printed in Leeds. We lived about 5 miles from Leeds city centre, and it had one little, advertisement, and it was the meeting of the Yorkshire UFO Society coming up that Sunday at 2:00 at a place on North Street in Leeds. So I decided to go along. Now, in those days on a Sunday, of course, it was like a ghost town here because everything used to close on a Sunday. There was nothing open. Anyway, get on the bus, and I found this, and I just found myself at home. The Yorkshire UFO Society was founded by two brothers, Graham and Mark Birdsall. They gave a presentation that day, which I found, fascinating, and I joined immediately. And it was just like, it was the place I felt I belonged. And again, we were very fortunate that in the late 70s, right through to the sort of late 1980s, really, areas in and around Yorkshire, mainly North Yorkshire, for whatever reason, gentlemen, had an awful lot of UFO sightings. The main sort of hot spot, if you like, was the moors in and around Carlton, which is a village just outside of Skipton in North Yorkshire. Carlton Moor was kind of the epicentre, if you like, but all around there, going over the border into Lancashire, across to Barnoldswick and further along, and further down into the Peak District. So that's where we concentrated our efforts, with no choice, to be honest, because the reports, filtered their way, down to us from these areas. So again, I think I was very lucky that I joined a local UFO group, and we just happened to be, inundated with UFO sightings at that time. So I learnt the ropes very quickly and jumped in with both feet and never looked back. So that's how I got involved, quite literally.
Yeah, I mean, that area itself is synonymous with UFO reports to this day. Do you have any reason as to why?
Well, we looked at every reason we could think of. It's not that densely populated, so it's not as if there's a lot of people live there.
Yeah.
We looked at a natural explanation. Earth lights was one of the possibilities we looked at. Lights that are given off by the Earth itself. There are fault lines in the area. That didn't seem to fit. So, we couldn't come up for any particular explanation. What was curious was that round about the same time, at a place called Hessdalen in central Norway, was having pretty much the same activity. And I've been to Hessdalen. It's way up in the middle of Norway. It's surrounded by 3 mountains, very sparsely populated. They now have a full batch of scientific equipment monitoring the area full time. We tried to get assistance from academia at the time in our locale. We lectured twice at Leeds University, for example. But this was a time during the Thatcher era. There was a lot of cuts, a lot of unemployment, money was short. So whilst they gave us some practical advice, they couldn't commit anything else. And we also lectured at the University in York, again, to try and get academia on board, but we never managed to do that.
No.
So we just took matters into our own hands. We made best use of whatever we could. And one of the things we did one year, we literally mounted a caravan on Carlton Moor, and we manned it for a full week. We put signposts up either side of the moor pointing to where it was. We did some local publicity, and that was to ask the locals to come out. Now, it's not a thoroughfare. There isn't that much traffic goes past it. But we were getting, on average, 10 or 12 people a day coming out there and relating their observations to us. And it became quite apparent quite quickly that whatever these things were, it wasn't something that had just started to happen. It had been there down the decades. And all kinds of other weird and wonderful things were reported to us at the same time. So we tried our damnedest to try and capture the phenomena on film. I had a whole array of camera equipment. We only have one photograph from Carlton Moor, taken by former police sergeant Tony Dodd. He took another one on his way out to past Bolton Abbey. It's not that far away. So those are the only real photographs we've got of these strange lights. There may be others lying around, but we just don't have them. And the only time I saw the lights up on those moors, we were actually belting along in a car, so there was no chance of photographing it. So, we tried to confront the phenomena, up close and personal. Whilst I got a glimpse of it, I never managed to get it face to face. But it wasn't through lack of trying. And like you said, the phenomena is still in those areas as to the best of my knowledge. So, for a young man, as I was at the time, I left school in 1974, joined the Yorkshire UFO Society in 1979, so I was 21. So it was perfect. I couldn't have got involved at a better time.
Yeah.
So, at that time, when you're going out in your caravan and you're getting that interaction with people from the people that was coming up to you, what was your favourite case as such as to what the account was that people were bringing to you? What was your favourite one out of them?
It's interesting because there was all kinds of stuff, but there's always one that sticks in my mind. There was a sort of an elderly couple came to see us one day. They drove up onto the moor to specifically come and see us. And they told us a story about where, at that point, there wasn't a large local supermarket near where they lived. They had to take quite a drive to get to a large supermarket. So they would go once a fortnight to do their shopping. And it was always the same day, always the same route. And they were driving back from this supermarket they lived actually near Skipton at the time. And they were coming down this particular stretch of the road and they said, look, they've built a factory at the side of the road. And what they said was set back into the landscape was a large factory. Yeah. With all the lights on as if they were working away. It was dark because this was winter time, and they thought, oh, that's nice, and off they went. Of course, a fortnight later, they made the same trip, roughly the same time, but certainly the same route. Guess what? No factory. It didn't exist. And they even told us the route, and we went and had a look ourselves in daylight, and drove the route they told us. And there is no building at all, let alone a factory. So that's just a strange little story out of a lot that came about, and they were as baffled as anyone, because they knew the area like the back of their hands. They'd always lived there. And not only that, there wasn't any factories anywhere in the area. So if they'd have taken a different route by mistake, there wasn't any. This is sort of pretty rural at the time. So it was a real puzzle. That's just an example of the kind of things that came out of the woodwork.
Yeah, I mean, we take from that this whatever they saw was huge.
Yeah, it was set back. It wasn't right next to the side of the road. It was set back in the fields. It had two sides with a lump in the middle of it. All the windows across it, all spaced out, all lit up as if it was working full steam ahead. And obviously they'd never seen it before, and they never saw it again. And that's just one of those little odd things. I remember another time this wasn't anything spectacular, but it still sticks in my mind. We'd received a letter from a gentleman in a little village up there, so we decided to pay him a visit. So when we got there, Mark and myself, the village was only a few houses really, and of course, although there was a number of his house on the letter, when we got there was no numbers on the actual doors.
Oh yeah.
So we had no idea which one was his house. So we just knocked on the door of the first one. And this lady said, we asked for Mr. whoever he was. And they said, have you come about the ghost dog? What's that? And, they had the tale of these two red lights that floated down through the village. And they were the red eyes of the ghost dog. In fact, all they'd seen was two red lights.
Yeah.
And this was a common thing, apparently. So, what we found, gentlemen, was that when you start to dig a little bit deeper, not only did you get UFO sightings, you got all these other things as well. And weird and wonderful, but nonetheless fascinating. And then, there's parts of the area that have their own myths and legends about other things as well. And that was another just a little odd thing that it just popped up and took us by surprise, Just gives your listeners some examples of the type of things we dealt with.
Yeah. Yeah, so now, you're talking back to when you was in your early 20s there.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, even back then, you're probably quite excited about some of the things that you're coming up against. When did, how do I say, not so much the seriousness of what you're approaching in some of the cases, but when did you really get into the fact that, well, hey up here, I could be living this throughout the whole life, this could be something, a part of me for the whole life, and think I've got to, I'm getting my head well and truly into this now.
Well, I don't think I ever thought, this is something I'm going to be involved in for the rest of my life, even though I have been, but I think one thing that kind of reinforced that I wasn't wasting my time was in the early 80s. So I'd only been at it, a few years. Not out in the wilds this time. Completely the opposite. I live in a town called Pontefract, whereas in the 1980s it was largely coal mining area.
Yeah.
The next town down from us is called Normanton. Again, big mining area, or it was. And I was living at my parents' at the time, and we received a call from a lady. I'd done some local newspaper articles. I remember this lady ringing me up saying, "You won't believe me, you won't believe me." I said, "Well, give me a chance." "Oh, you won't believe me." Cutting a long story short, Mark Birdsall and myself went to visit this lady, Mrs. Westerman, and her and several of her children had seen this thing. Now, it was on a weekend, a nice day, and she lived in an elevated house just up from a cul-de-sac. And the children were outside playing a ball game just after lunch. She was actually in the house washing the dishes after lunch. The ball goes up in the air. It was a make-up ball game, same ball game I played when I was a youngster. We made it up, and they saw this thing in the sky. It came down at an angle, stopped in midair, and dropped to the ground in some fields that lay adjacent to the bottom of their road. That's where the cul-de-sac was. There was some electricity pylons, because we have not far from here the power station, which is closed now. And they run up the stairs to the front door and I open up, Mum, there's an aeroplane crashed in the field. Now, Mrs. Westerman came out of the front door, and because it was an elevated house, she could see across these fields. And she said it was shaped like a Mexican hat, but it was silver. And so she got hold of the kids. Off they went. Now, you walk beyond the cul-de-sac into the fields. At one point, you go down a little dip, and they lost sight of it. They come up the other side, and this field is bordered by a small fence. And she says, now there are 3 tall men standing in this field, waving something over the ground. They're all dressed in white one-piece suits. They have not gloves on, they have mittens. They have some kind of visor over their face, big boots. And the children wanted to climb the fence, but she wouldn't let them. And at this point, the three men go around the back. It rises up, stopped in midair, and shot off from whence it had came. And they were quite astonished by it. They didn't call it a spaceship or spacemen or anything like that. We even interviewed one of the children's friends. He'd gone home for lunch and he'd missed it all. And he came back after lunch and he was a bit disappointed that, because they were all talking about it, he'd actually missed it. Now, what bothered Mrs. Westerman as much as anything, this was a lovely, bright, sunny day. She was sure it must be on the news that night, the local TV news or in the newspaper. There's a busy motorway runs right next to it, to Normanton. It's the M62. I can hear it from here almost. Yeah. But not a thing. I mean, nothing. And that really, really did puzzle her. All I can say is, Mrs. Westerman, her husband worked down the mines at the time. That were the type of family I'd grown up with all my life. Like I said, I played the same ball game as the children did when I was their age. They were either lying or telling the truth. There was no middle ground. This wasn't a helicopter or anything like that. And I had no reason to say they were lying.
Yeah.
And what is curious, I'll bring this right up to date for you. So, we lost contact down the years, and I've tried once or twice to track the children down. And never managed to do it until this year. I did a little podcast for someone. And a lady in New Zealand listened to it, and I told this same story. I've just told you about this UFO landing in Normanton. And she emailed me, and she says, I'm from Normanton. I've never heard about this. She says, can you tell me the family's name again? And I said it was Mrs. Westerman. She says, my best friend was called Westerman before she got married. And she was one of the witnesses.
Was you able to speak to?
I've been in touch with her, and she has confirmed it. And I'm still in the process of trying to get to meet her again face to face.
She's still living in the area then?
She's still in Normanton. It's just that she's got a different name now because she's married.
Married, yeah.
Because one of the things I did one year was go through the telephone book and look for people of the same name. Well, obviously she's changed it.
Yeah.
So we have been in communication. She has confirmed all the main points. And, in fact, I contacted her just a couple of weeks ago, the day before she was going on holiday. So I have to get back to her when she gets back. I'll let her get settled in. Yeah. But isn't it amazing, where technology works now, that via podcast here, via New Zealand, and hey presto. And it was a fascinating case.
I think the most disconcerting element of it is that there is no noise. I think, in my own sighting, that was one of the things that stuck in my mind, is that how did this thing move so quickly? How did it hover for a start? How did it move so quickly afterwards and then not make a sound? It's, that it don't compute with, with the human brain, because we're used to things moving, making a noise, and that's where it sort of swings me to believe that it was some sort of, like I say, off-planet technology. I can't say it was made by, obviously, but obviously you're speaking to these people now, and obviously you're going to speak to her again, but it sounds like they were seeing humans rather than, what we'd term aliens. I mean, they've got visors. Obviously, we expect something to come from a different planet.
All I can say is they were humanoid, she couldn't, and that's it. And there was no noise when this thing departed, as you've rightly said. It was totally silent. But nonetheless, it's a built-up area. She fully expected that maybe somebody of her neighbours had seen it, because kids were out playing. It was a lovely summer's day. But
you run across these cases, though, don't you, where certain people can see it and certain people can't see it?
Well, that's it. I mean, I've run this particular case in our local media a couple of times, specifically to look for the children. I wanted to get their perspective now from 30 years on, and what they make of it now as adults, looking back on it. But I also said, anyone else see anything that day? And not a peep, nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. So, it is most peculiar, and it is one of those aspects of the phenomenon that does leave you scratching your head, sometimes more than what the individuals report observing. Yep. Why was it them? Why was it there at that point? Yep. No one else. It's almost as if they were in a little bubble, and it's only them that could see it for whatever reason, or experience it, whatever phrase you want to use. Yep. The nature and origin of which still escapes us. But like you said, people in the States will probably have never heard of cases like this because, the languish in the files sat next to me where I am today. I still have an old filing cabinet, because there was no internet in those days. It was all done in person, and that's the way we did it.
I think one of the things really is, like, going back to someone seeing it and not seeing it, is I think it's down to the human eye, because it's not, you could say to someone, hey, look at that plane in the sky, and it takes some people, a fair while, but to you it's so obvious, and to others they can't see it. So I don't think all the time it's a case that they can't see it, it's more identifying
sometimes
it.
Sometimes your brain don't want to see it.
Well, blanks it out. Yeah. Now, going on to some of the cases as well, not only in the UK, but all over the world as well. We wanted to talk to you about your best UFO case. So not based over here. Wait, it might be based over here, but what's your best UFO case that you've had all over the world? Yeah,
it's not something I investigated at the time, but in the early 1980s, there was a magazine come out, and I read of a case there that took place actually on the 11th of October 1973 at a place called Pascagoula in Mississippi. And it involved two fishermen, Charlie Parker, who was 42, and his young friend Calvin Hickson, who was 18, almost 19 at the time. And they decided they'd finished work for the day. And they're both keen fishermen, so they decided to go fishing in the river that night. Now, the location where they were going was an old abandoned shipyard, but it wasn't in the middle of nowhere. It was just off Highway 90. The river is extremely large. There's a huge, great bridge, road bridge goes over the river. So there was traffic around. And as they're driving up, Calvin was driving, they passed the no entry sign, which bothered him somewhat, but his pal said, don't worry about it. So they tried one location, and there was too many bugs there. They just got bitten to death. So they moved along to this old pier and started fishing. And they hadn't been fishing long when, they were looking out into the water, and these blue lights came from behind them. Now, Calvin's first thought, well, it's the police. I knew we shouldn't have ignored the no entry sign. We're going to spend the night in jail. But when they turned round with this intense blue light, and it's the intensity of it blinded them at first. It was so bright. And then they could make out this rugby ball shaped thing with two lights at one end. And then this opening appeared. And out of this opening came three humanoid figures, but certainly weren't human. And they didn't walk. They floated across the ground towards them. Now, they couldn't run. There was nowhere to go because they were surrounded. And they described the creatures as having a head but no neck, no eyes, no mouth, but grey wrinkly skin like that of an elephant. And carrot-like protrusions out of the side of the head and one out the front. And legs didn't move. They stuck together and like stumpy feet. Two of these beings got hold of Charlie. One got hold of Calvin. And Calvin felt this prick in his arm. And he instantly became relaxed. He believed it was some kind of injection. They took him on board this thing. Calvin was laid on a glass bed that he calls. And he said this small thing came down from the ceiling about the size of a pack of cards, and it moved around him, clicking all the time. This big ugly creature, as he described it, was stood in the corner. And he says this thing then went back up into the ceiling, and this female-looking creature came and she put her hands on his face. She had funny-looking fingers and one down his throat. And next, I remember, they were returned to the pier, and this thing shot off. And they jumped in the car. At first, they decided, we're not going to tell anyone. They'll think we're nuts. So they were driving back, but they pulled in at a payphone. And Charlie, being the elder two, phoned the local Air Force base at Keesler. They said, we don't investigate UFOs, call the local sheriff. So they phoned the sheriff. The sheriff said, where are you? Right, stay there, I'll come out. So they dispatched a car. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a drink.
Yeah, nice.
And the first thing the patrolman did when they caught up with them was give them a sobriety test, can you walk in a straight line? They hadn't been drinking or anything like that. They took them into the police station and separated them and interviewed them. Didn't really believe them. So they put them together in a room, and there was a table next to them. Unbeknown to Charlie and Calvin, there was a tape recorder playing. So they left them. And a few minutes later, they came back, took the tape out of it. They didn't see it. They had no idea. And, of course, on the tape, it got the nickname of the secret tape. You can hear them still talking about what happened. Charlie was trying to calm his young companion down. Calvin was extremely distraught. So the police said, right, guys, you can go. There's not a lot we can do about it, really. They both got up to go to work the next morning at the shipyard. And all hell had broken loose. Somehow the story had got out. There was journalists from here, there, and everywhere. So the two guys were sent home. They went back the next day, and then Dr. Alan Hynek turned up, and a gentleman by the name of Dr. James Harder. Harder tried to hypnotize both gentlemen. He couldn't manage it that well with Calvin. It is believed he did hypnotize Charlie, and the two guys went to the hospital, had a checkout. They were then escorted to Keesler Air Force Base, where they'd telephoned first, but were told to get lost. And they were checked there for radiation, which was found to be negative. And the people there said, while you're here, perhaps you can tell us what happened. And there is a tape recording of that conversation as well. So they were interviewed at Keesler. And the story went around the world. Now, Calvin was extremely upset by all this. He was due to get married to his childhood sweetheart. He actually lived 200 miles away. He'd only gone out there to work. So he went home. Didn't really want anything to do with it. He was worried what his prospective father-in-law would make of it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the elder guy, Charles Hickson, he was the one that did the interviews and TV and all this kind of thing. And so it was a sensational case. Calvin, 3 weeks later, ended up having a breakdown, ended up in the hospital. And he was kind of like, ran away from it most of his life. He would occasionally appear at things, but he kept out of the way. Now, in 1983, Charles Hickson wrote a book called UFO Contact at Pascagoula with a gentleman called William Mendes. Didn't hardly sell any copies. In 2015, I started my own book publishing venture called Flying Disc Press. And I managed to get the rights to Charles Hickson's book. And I thought, would it be nice? Charles died in 2011. I thought, wonder if I can find the other guy, Calvin Parker. So I thought I'd get an interview and put it in the back of the book. So it took me about 3 months, but I finally tracked him down. He lives just outside of Pascagoula now in Mississippi. And it was a bit reluctant to speak to me at first, rather quiet. But eventually we started chatting. And he said, well, Philip, I've been thinking about writing my own book. So that was good. So after a few conversations, we decided to write Calvin's book. And he told us the whole story, everything. But one of the things that happened was that Calvin did some local publicity, local news and newspapers. And one of the little local TV things he did ended up on YouTube. And somebody left a comment saying, my mum and dad were on the opposite side of the river that night and they saw it too. So that grabbed my attention. So I managed to find this it was a young woman, managed to find her on social media, and she gave me the telephone number of her mum and dad. And they were Mr. and Mrs. Blair, now living in Alabama. And we spoke to them, and what Mr. and Mrs. Blair told us was they were indeed on the other side of the river that night. Mr. Blair worked in the fishing industry and was waiting for a boat to come in, and it was late. So he was having a 40 winks in the back of the car. Mrs. Blair was outside on a little pier, and she said, I could see these blue lights on the opposite side of the river. She said it looked like this thing was looking for somebody, or it was lost and didn't know where it was going. And then the boat came in. So Mr. Blair got out. He saw the blue lights as well, but he was a bit grumpy, Yeah. This thing was late. So he marched off in front of her, and she said, all of a sudden, there was a splash, big splash, in the water next to me. And she said, I looked down, and there is this grey man in the water. And she says, he went under the water, and I didn't see him come up again. So she ran up to the boat and literally threw her husband's belongings on the boat and then shot off because she had to run back down the way she'd come. And Mr. Blair told her not to say anything, people think we're nuts. But when she saw Calvin on the television, the local TV, that's when her daughter left the comment. Now, right up until the end of last year, Mr. Blair kept saying, I only saw the blue lights. Anyway, cut a long story short, he took ill. And I spoke to him while I was in the hospital, and he said, Philip, I saw the humanoid as well. I just didn't want to admit it. And he said, I saw the humanoid come up out of the water and go back across to the other side of the river. And he says, I saw the UFO take off. And it was almost, with the greatest respect to Mr. Blair, almost like a deathbed confession. Yeah. Because he was given like a 50-50 chance of his coming out of the operation he was about to have. Thankfully, he made it. He's still very ill, God bless him. But, and he told his wife all about it as well, of course, and she was amazed. And that's just one. The investigations have gone on. For example...
So that's Philip Mantle there talking about. If you
Fantastic,
if you want to hear more of his of today's episode, the part 2 is now on Patreon. You can join on there for as little as $2. Really helps us guys out as well.
Indeed. You'll see this episode on there, and it'll just be extended.
Yeah.
So just click on this episode. I'm keeping all the Patreon episodes in order now, so if you're listening via Patreon, you don't have to come off it, basically.
Yeah.
Just stay on there.
Keep on it.
And you don't need to go on the free feed at all. I think that's the easiest way to do it. But yeah, I mean, it gets into some cases there, and this UFO thing, it's just like, obviously, we got onto the skeptic side of things as well, and these cases where they seem to have a purpose. Let's say aliens, for the sake of argument, they seem to be doing something for a reason.
Yeah.
But we're not sure what the reason is. And then you get the people who say, well, they're doing it for the good of mankind. They're trying to make alien babies, hybrid babies, this kind of thing, and we don't know.
No one knows.
No.
No one knows.
And,
no one knows.
and the fact that it keeps going on and on and on, I think it's worrying myself. I go along with Hawkins. I mentioned this. I know I've said it before, but I go along with his theory, really do, because it just don't make sense.
Yeah. Well,
if it's really for our benefit, surely they could just tell us.
You'd hope so.
Because if it's going to benefit us, then we don't. Then why couldn't we? Why don't we need to know?
Well, that's another question for another day. But hopefully, we get to find out. I mean, in future years to come, will we ever get to find out? I don't think we will.
I hope we do.
I hope we do, but I don't think we will.
I hope we get the answers to a lot of these things. But it's the same with the Bigfoot. When we find the answer out to what Bigfoot really is, will we be ready for the answer? Because if you go, what I've sort of, my theory is to what it is, and obviously that changes everything.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's once it's out of the box, that's it.
So
and it could just be an ape.
Well,
it could just be an ape, but we shall see. I think, especially nowadays, with everybody's got a dash cam. A lot of people go out with GoPros. If people are running across these things, as they do now, but without these cameras, then the percentage of films. This goes for UFOs and other things as well. But the percentage of films that we get, on YouTube, etc., is going to go up and up.
Well, counts should go up.
Should go up. Yeah,
should go up.
Counts are going up, but that obviously could just be, especially when it comes to Bigfoot and things like that, it could just be because of the population swelling and going into more, urban, rural areas, and obviously we're crossing paths more often.
Yeah. Just a few things that we've got lined up coming up as well on future shows.
Yes.
I've got the mangaka episode that I'll be going over. We've got a bit cultural, some of these, yes.
We touched on it a little bit before.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we touched up on that.
I've got a story from Megan.
Yeah, Megan. Megan.
Never know how you pronounce that one.
But yeah, we've got quite a bit planned for this month and next month, so it's going to be quite a packed couple of months with shows. But yeah, lots to go on. But if you'd like to hear the rest of Philip's Mantle's accounts on UFOs, be sure to check over at Patreon. Much appreciated to those who have signed up already and continue to support as well. But keep an eye out for more shows coming.
Yep, and share with share the free episode with as many people as you can. Get people to listen to the show. That's the best way to grow a podcast is word of mouth. So
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's all out there.
Post,
yeah.
If you post a podcast,
But
we've got that. Obviously, I was waiting on the supplier for the $15 Patrons, and I think that's come through now, is it?
Yeah, it's come through now, so that's definitely going out this week. I'll get it out today if I can.
Yeah,
I'd say post is gone, but I'll get it ready anyway.
Yeah, can't post an MP3, but
can't post an MP3.
We can post the.
But yeah, they're here now. So sorry about the wait on that, but they're here and they're going out.
Yes. Okay, I just want to give a little shout out to Dan, the Viking Gambling. And his podcast, it's called
This Week in History.
Okay, and we had Dan on recently for the Norse mythology episode. So if you go onto iTunes and type This Week in History, you'll get his podcast. It's the one with the Spitfire on the front, so I think there's another one called the same name.
Makes me cry, his episode, so it does.
What's he covered? He's covered Buddy Holly, Auschwitz.
Buddy Holly, that's the one that
Queen
got to
Elizabeth or something. Buddy Holly, yeah. So go and check that out, and then obviously if you enjoy it, make sure you tell him that you came from here, so he knows that I did give him a shout out. And he's coming on in the future to do another episode. I won't go into much details here because I think I'll spoil it, but he's coming on to cover something else in the future.
Definitely. That being said,
have a great weekend.
And
we'll see you on the other side.
Bye for now.
Well, they've gone. No, just for now. It wasn't the right time for us to meet. But there'll be other nights, other stars for us to watch. They'll be back.
We We've got all the news right here.
I'm gonna stop you right there. I see you about to settle on a day-old donut for breakfast. Well, this is a chicken intervention. Because McChicken biscuits and Chicken McGriddles are now at McDonald's. So just hit that drive-thru and change your life. For breakfast, you got this. Wake up breakfast.
Say good morning to McChicken for breakfast. Right now at your local McDonald's, you can mix and match 2 Chicken McGriddles or McChicken biscuits for just $3. Price and participation may vary at participating McDonald's for a limited time.